Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp here with you, sitting in for Hunt Palmer. We got Jacob Beck. We got Cassie Spazzali here as well. Hunt out being a father of two. He now has a pair of boys. Speaking of, Cassie, I found something out this morning.
What's that?
Jacob Beck's a twin. I did not know this.
You didn't know that?
I found this out this morning.
What? Oh, yeah. What did T-Bob tell you?
T-Bob had a picture that he took of you. Okay. I asked him, I said, okay, so you actually wound up running into, because so many people went to Disney for Louisiana. I mean, we had like 4 in this building. I was like, you actually ran into his brother and knew it was his brother? And T-Bob goes, oh, I didn't have to ask. I was like, okay, well, what do you mean? He shows me the picture. Guys, this is Jacob Beck. Like identical to, what's his name?
Justin.
Okay, Jacob. I knew I was gonna think like
Jacob
Jackson
and
or something.
Justin.
I knew it was something with a J. Twins always got to be.
I've definitely told at least you and Hunt that I have a twin.
I knew you had a twin.
Okay.
I didn't know if it was
I had no idea.
fraternal or
Yeah.
identical.
I knew you had a brother. I did not know it was a twin. So I say all that to ask you this, Beck. Has your brother ever came and filled in for you at work?
No, he has not, because he does not know how to do this job.
Okay, well, I mean, guys, spitting image of Jacob Beck.
Yeah,
like,
he does look like me very.
When I
much
saw
so.
the picture, I'm like, I know that guy. I've met that guy a bunch of times.
Did y'all ever switch in high school or
no,
college?
Everybody always asks that. We never did that. I think in college that I may have. I think maybe once I maybe got him to do a couple of assignments for a class, and then I think I did some for him, but we never went to each other's classes. I don't think. I mean, we were never like that. Adventurous.
Wait. You did some of his assignments. He did some of yours, but y'all didn't go to class.
No, yeah.
So I was like, what does that have to do with being twins? I can do Cassie's homework if I don't go to class.
No, you're right. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, that was all we did. We didn't do anything crazy like that.
You didn't do the scandalous thing of he had a date he didn't want to go on, and he's like, hey, can you go?
No way, no. No, what we did one time at a youth camp or something when we were in middle school. One time we were wearing, because we were in middle school, and when you're a middle school guy, you just wear the same thing every day because you don't care.
Yeah.
So the last day that we were there, we switched clothes, and we're wearing each other's clothes that we had been wearing all week, and nobody obviously could tell the difference. So that's about all we did in terms of that.
When y'all were kids, I know I see this a lot, mainly with girls, but I don't know. Well, I guess I know one person who's a twin. It's you. I don't know any twins. Did y'all have assigned colors from your parents? In baby pictures, were you wearing blue, he was wearing red, or vice
pretty
versa?
much. Yeah. So my mom usually, I can't remember, either I or my brother, one of us wore blue, one of us wore red usually. And it's funny, if I look at pictures of us when we were 2 or 3 years old, it's pretty hard to tell. Even I sometimes can't really tell. And I wonder, what if one of us what if they switched us up at some point and just, how did they actually always remember?
What if you're Justin?
What if I'm actually Justin? Yeah. It's possible.
Oh, man. This is exciting. I didn't know any of that. I found this out, I guess, this morning.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry. Yesterday before I left work, because they were on remote this morning. Yesterday before I left work, T-Bob showed me. And I was like, wait, how do you know this was for sure Beck's brother? He's like, oh, look at the picture.
Yeah.
I was like, hold the hell up.
I told T-Bob, I was like, yeah, my brother's going to be in Disney, so you may end up seeing him. I figured, it's such a big place. The chances are so slim. But of course, my brother texts me. He's like, oh, I saw T-Bob. Like, wow, that's of course.
What are the chances?
Yeah, a small world. It's a small world, they say in Disney World.
Yeah, I mean, he told me that. He's like, I did not need any confirmation.
Yeah.
This is him. And I put up the picture. I'm like, is that Beck? Or is that his brother? I was like, I don't know.
Did Beck actually go to Disney?
I didn't. No,
I mean, he
did
may
not.
have.
I did not.
Okay, look, a little bit of a weirder start to the show here on the Hunt Palmer Show. That is more reminiscent of Off the Bench instead of the Hunt Palmer Show. We're jam-packed today. We have a lot to talk about. The Saints have a big signing that they re-signed one of their key players on defense. We're going to dive into a ton of NFL free agency. I'm going to give you my favorite moves and some moves maybe I'm not crazy about. As spring practice starts, not just for LSU, but all of college football, CBS Sports put out a list of the top quarterbacks. They put out a top 10 of their power rankings nationwide for quarterbacks heading into spring. Garrett Nussmeier is entirely too low. Not only that, the quarterbacks ahead of him, I have a big problem with. We're going to talk about that. Glen West of Go 247, he's going to hop on with us. Talk some LSU basketball. They wrapped up their season. And then, of course, the first media access of LSU spring practice will be tomorrow morning. So we'll get his thoughts on that as well. Hour number 2, we're going to have Sharif Ishak in his normal 2:30 spot. Talk all things Saints. A lot has happened over the last 2 days. If you haven't been paying attention, and then, of course, we're going to close this thing out like we do every day with a little bit of Ask the Bench. All right, it's a jam-packed
Ask the bench.
Take it or leave it. Dude, every single day.
Oh, man. Well, maybe tomorrow you'll have the kinks worked out. Maybe.
We're going to say, this was my life the entire week last week.
Was.
So we're going to, look, take it or leave it. We're closing out. Doesn't matter. We're closing out the show at some point. Look, let's get this thing started like we do every day.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
All right, so I mentioned the Saints had a big free agent signing, and it's actually a player that was just in their building last year. So the Saints are re-signing defensive end Chase Young to a 3-year, $51 million deal. It could actually be worth up to $57 million based on certain incentives. Look, if you remember when they signed Young a year ago, the biggest concern with him was, can Chase Young stay healthy? He won Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2020. He had 7.5 sacks, but he tore his ACL early in 2021. He only played 3 games during the 2022 seasons. He had 7.5 sacks combined between the Commanders and the Niners in 2023 because, once again, he was in and out of the lineup. When you signed him, you knew the talent was there, right? I mean, he's a number 2 overall pick. He played at Ohio State. He won basically every award a defender can win in college along the defensive line. Again, I mentioned he was a Defensive Rookie of the Year. Your biggest concern when you signed Chase Young was, can he stay on the field? He did that. I mean, he played in every game for you a year ago. He had 5.5 sacks. He had 8 tackles for a loss. A handful of tackles as well. He was pretty good for you. As a matter of fact, he was tied for 11th in terms of total pressures all across the NFL. It was that 1-year, $13 million prove-it deal that a lot of guys sign when they're injured. They want to show that they could make an impact. And he did, and the Saints rewarded him for it. Now, my first thought when I saw that the Saints signed Chase Young for $51 million was, man, that's a lot of money for Chase Young. However, I've come around to it. I don't know who else you would get other than Chase Young. You had to sign a pass rusher. Cam Jordan's not getting any younger. He's 40 years old out there playing. Carl Granderson is a solid player. He can't do it by himself, though. He is not that caliber of player. You had to re-sign Chase Young. If not, you had to hope that the player you really wanted in the NFL draft fell to you, whether it's first round, second round, wherever. This does one of two things. It allows you to have your draft strategy in round 1 become a little bit more clear. The draft picture for the Saints is kind of clearing up because not only do you re-sign Chase Young, so here's your defensive ends. You're probably still going to sign one. You don't have to use a first-round pick on a guy unless there's someone there that you absolutely love, and if you do, do it. I mean, if a Michael Williams falls to you at 9 or you're in love with somebody else, Jalen Walker's a guy we talked about yesterday. If you absolutely love one of those guys, by all means, take them. But defensive line is now nowhere close to being your biggest need because on the edge, you have Chase Young, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, and then in the interior, you have Brian Bresee. You signed Devon Godshaw yesterday. You just re-signed Nathan Shepard, Colin Saunders. You actually cleared up cap space for both those guys. Saints now have $13 million worth of available cap space because guys like Kalen Saunders, Nathan Shepard, they have restructured their deals because that's what the Saints do. They restructure deals. So you have all those guys, D-line on the edge. That's no longer your biggest need. It also tells me that the Saints definitely believe that this team can win now. I don't believe that. I don't think this team is good enough. Are they going to get better in the draft? I sure hope so if they hit on all their players. They have a prime spot right there at number 9 to grab a game-changing player. The problem is, I don't trust Mickey Loomis to do it. At least not hit on almost every draft pick. He's been very hit and miss, especially in recent years. I mean, we know about the first-round misses. Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner. Honestly, I think Cesar Ruiz is a first-round miss. The book's still out on Trevor Penning, but it doesn't look great. Chris Olave appeared to be a hit, but he's had so many concussions. How much longer is he actually going to be on your roster? But it's no longer your biggest need. It is a need. It is not your biggest need. You're paper thin at corner. We talked about that yesterday. You basically have one proven safety on your roster. Jordan Howden's he's been up and down. So outside of Tyrann Mathieu, you don't really have anything there. You still need pass catchers. I mentioned the health of Olave. I don't think Rashid Shaheed is a wide receiver 2 in the NFL. I think Rashid Shaheed is a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. A good one. If you want to win football games, Rashid Shaheed needs to be your wide receiver 3, not your wide receiver 2. But again, that's far from your biggest issue as well. And then I also looked at, okay, well, if you let Chase Young go, who else could you have potentially signed? We obviously know about Joey Bosa, right? He's the big name. The Chargers let him go. Look, he is all but locked up with the 49ers. We know about him. I think he would have cost you a little bit more than a Chase Young. And his numbers were very similar to Chase Young's only because he hasn't been able to stay on the field. You have the opposite concern with Joey Bosa that you do Chase Young. Chase Young, you're waiting for him to break out, have that dominant season. You were hoping he could stay healthy. He's done that. Joey Bosa, on the other side, has had dominant seasons. The problem is, in the last 2.5 years, he hasn't been able to stay on the field. If you're the Saints, you have to stay away from that because that's a big problem you've had with a lot of your draft picks and your high caliber free agents in the past few years. Another big name that had kind of recently, up until yesterday, been linked to the New Orleans Saints is Matthew Judon. You guys know the name. He's been with the Baltimore Ravens, the New England Patriots, most recently the Atlanta Falcons. He's been a big-time player in this league for a number of years. 3 years ago, Matthew Judon, big name, one of the top free agents. He had 12 sacks with New England. The next year, he followed it up, 15 and a half sacks for that Patriots defense. He was outstanding. Since then, he missed most of 2023. He did have 4 sacks in 4 games, so he made an impact, but he only played in 4 games in 2023. Last year, Judon, 5.5 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss in 15 games. That's essentially what you got from Chase Young. And just like Joey Bosa, I think because of name recognition, what he's done in the past, Matthew Judon would probably carry a bigger price tag than a Chase Young. Not to mention, Chase Young, only 25 years old. Matthew Judon is 32. He's not getting any younger. If you sign Matthew Judon, you basically just got another Cam Jordan at this point in their career. Judon certainly shown flashes, but you essentially signed another Cam Jordan. You needed to get younger at this position with a talented player that is proven, that can show they can stay healthy. Chase Young checks all those boxes. So again, when I originally saw the 3-year, $51 million deal, I didn't like it. I was like, this is a little too much for Chase Young, but I don't know where else the Saints could have went where they could have got a better deal. Bosa's older than Young, and he's had injuries in recent years. Judon basically had the exact same season as a Chase Young, and he's 32 years old, not much younger than a Cam Jordan, who is well past his prime. You got a 25-year-old player who is a second overall pick. He's a former defensive rookie of the year. You know that if he plays a full season, he can make an impact for you. I just mentioned he was 11th in the league in terms of pass rushing pressure across the entire league. I think this is a good signing. I think this is something you had to do. Now, whether it was Young or somebody else, you had to shore up that defensive line. Yesterday, you worked on your defensive tackle position when it was announced that Davin Godchall has joined your team. You restructured Nathan Shepard and Kalen Saunders. Now you re-sign Chase Young. You lock him up long-term. You've done a really good job building depth on this defensive line with proven commodities that have been in your building over the last few days. I actually really like this signing for the New Orleans Saints. All right, look, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, CBS Sports put out a list of their college football quarterback power rankings. This is nationwide, heading into spring. They put out their top 10. I have a real problem with where Garrett Nussmeier is and the quarterbacks that are above him. We'll talk about that here on the other side on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Welcome back in a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp sitting in for Hunt Palmer, who is out being a dad at least for the next few days or so. Mentioned it going into break there that CBS Sports put out the college football quarterback power rankings heading into spring practice. This comes from Tom Fornelli of CBS Sports. He just ranks the top 10. Garrett Nussmeier did rank the top 10, but I'm not so concerned on where Garrett Nussmeier ranked, but who they ranked ahead of him. First off, number 1 on this list is Arch Manning. This is ridiculous. I have always been a fan of the Manning family. Peyton Manning was probably my favorite football player growing up. Never had an issue with Eli. Archie Manning is a Saints legend. But I got to be honest, I'm kind of getting tired of the Arch Manning stuff, and I'm usually someone that stuff like this doesn't bother. This guy hasn't even been a starting quarterback in college. He started 3 games for the Texas Longhorns with honestly mixed reviews. I think Arch Manning is very talented. But it's different when you're the guy. We don't know what this offense is going to look like with Arch Manning at the helm. Again, he's very talented, but look who he lost. Gunnar Helm, who was first-team All-SEC at tight end. Matthew Golden, who's a likely first-round pick. Isaiah Bond, who's going to get drafted somewhere in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. You lose all those guys, and you're stepping in your first year as a starting quarterback in the SEC. I like Arch Manning. I think he is a very good player. To have him number 1 in your quarterback power rankings heading into spring, what are we doing? This is getting a little ridiculous. Pump the brakes on this guy. It's going to turn into one of those things where it's, hey, we have ranked Arch Manning so high that he is never going to live up to the expectations we set for him. And it's unfortunate because I think Arch Manning actually is going to be a very good player. I think at the end of the year, we may very well look and say, hey, the best quarterback in college football plays at Texas. That is certainly a possibility. He cannot be number 1 entering the season. He has not been a starting quarterback in college. It's going to be a new look offense for them. They got some running backs back, but they lose a lot of weapons on the outside. No, I think Steve Sarkisian is going to be fine. Texas recruits well. I think he's going to get more weapons. But again, just like Arch, they're all unproven. I don't really understand why he is at the top of this list. The guy who comes in at number 2 might be the only one on this list that I'm okay being ranked ahead of Garrett Nussmeier. And LSU fans are going to get a look at him early in the 2025 college football season. It's Clemson's Cade Klubnik. This makes sense. Cade Klubnik is entering his 3rd year as the starting quarterback at Clemson. I have no issue with him being over Garrett Nussmeier. He had 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 INTs. So while Nussmeier threw for a lot of yards, he scored a lot of touchdowns. Nussmeier's turnovers were a little up. He was a first-year starting quarterback in the SEC. Cade Klubnik did not have those turnover problems. Also, I talked about this a few weeks ago when I had to fill in for Hunt. We kind of previewed the LSU strength of schedule. A lot of people think that the Clemson game could be the make or break game for LSU in 2025. Cade Klubnik gets back his top 3 receivers from a year ago. Now, he loses Phil Maffa, who was his starting running back, but Clemson couldn't run the ball last year anyways, and Cade Klubnik was fine. I think he's in for a heck of a year. I'm okay with this. I'm not going to sit up here and be an LSU homer and say Garrett Nussmeier has to be number 1. Even though I think he is a really talented player and could be number 1 by season's end. I'm okay with Klubnik. At number 3, we have Carson Beck. You have got to be kidding me putting Carson Beck at number 3. 2 years ago, sure, put Carson Beck at 3. Heading into last year, sure, that's fine. Carson Beck at Georgia, his first year, 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Really good season. He kind of degressed last year. In 2023, 72% completion percentage. Last year dropped all the way down to 64%. Now, I get it. He lost some weapons. He lost Ladd McConkey. He lost Brock Bowers. His completion percentage fell by 8 total percentage points, and he threw double the amount of interceptions in year 2 at Georgia than he did year 1. And when you look at Garrett Nussmeier's overall numbers, he was similar. 64% completion percentage, 4,000 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That was Nussmeier last year. But Carson Beck is also going to a brand new school. His numbers were similar to Nuss's, but that's a year 2 quarterback who is degressed compared to a year 1 guy who's his first year starting in the SEC. He's at a new school. He's got brand new weapons. He's coming off of an injury. How's he going to look there? And also, you're going to a Miami school that has to replace Xavier Restrepo, your number 1 receiver from a year ago. You have to replace Isaiah Arroyo, the talented tight end. There's no guarantee he's going to have top flight weapons at Miami. At 4 and 5, they have Tom has Drew Allard at 4 and Sam Levitt at 5. I get it. I mean, I actually think Nussmeier is a little bit better quarterback than Sam Levitt. But when you look at Drew Aller, he had a really good season. 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, about 66% completion percentage. I'm okay with it. Plus, he had a lot more team success than Garrett. So if you want to look at that and say, hey, these guys may go further in the playoffs, I like this team a little bit better, I'm okay with that. Sam Levitt, I could go either way just because Cam Scatterbu was such a big part of that offense. Also, he only completed 61% of his passes. Garrett Nussmeier's almost at 65%. But he did have 24 touchdowns. He had 6 interceptions. We know Levitt can run a little bit. I can give or take those. And those I'm not as mad about as I am an Arch Manning or a Carson Beck. As far as Garrett Nussmeier goes, they have Garrett Nussmeier at 6. And again, Tom Fornelli at CBS Sports put out this. He says, I'll never stop being enamored with the cannon that Garrett Nussmeier has, nor should you, considering that the throws you see him make at times. I don't think I need to worry about that as far as arm strength. It's clear that he loves to show it off, and it's one of the things he loves about Nussmeier. He said, however, it is better for Nussmeier's draft stock and LSU's ability to compete in the SEC if you harness that a little, if you pull back on it and maybe not be quite as aggressive. Essentially, Tom said all that to just say, hey, Garrett, cut down on the turnover numbers. I think he will. I think Garrett will cut down on the turnover numbers. And you got to understand, Nussmeier's offensive line was not good at run blocking. Your running game was inconsistent. While Caden Durham gave it a huge jump, Garrett almost kind of did have to do it all on his own. Look, he learned, and then later in the year, he was a lot better about that than he was earlier. I think he's going to be fine. But look, when you look at Garrett Nussmeier, you get Joe Sloan back, so you're working with your same offensive coordinator. It's year 2 in the program. You lose Kyron Lacey and Mason Taylor. Mason Taylor is a huge loss. However, LSU did a pretty good job of replacing Mason Taylor. You got Bauer Sharp. You got Donovan Green. We know what Trey'Dez Green can do. And then look at his receivers. Aaron Anderson wound up being your number 1 wide receiver as far as guys lined up out wide at the end of last year. You saw the impact Chris Hilton had at the end of the year once he finally got healthy. You have a 100% healthy Chris Hilton. You have Aaron Anderson back. You have Xavion Thomas. And then you add Nick Anderson, who's 6'5", and you had Barian Brown, who's one of the fastest players in the SEC. Garrett Nussmeier has better weapons than he had a year ago. I think his running game is going to be better than it was a year ago. He has the experience and the growing pains that comes with year 1 as a starting quarterback in the SEC. The biggest concern right now for Garrett Nussmeier is his offensive line. But if they can get that figured out, Garrett Nussmeier is in for a big year. That's why I don't like, look, I get it. You have to judge them off of what they did in the past, but again, a guy like Carson Beck degressed from year 1 to year 2 as a starter. He's going to a new school in a new system, having to replace a lot of weapons from a year ago at Miami. And then Arch Manning hasn't even been a full-time starting quarterback anywhere in college football. You can't rank both of those guys ahead of Garrett Nussmeier. And it's not even based on what you think they're going to do. This was going into spring where these guys rank in the pecking order in terms of college football. For what it's worth, behind Garrett Nussmeier, Lenore Sellers at South Carolina at 7, Sawyer Robertson at Baylor at number 8, Rocco Becht at Iowa State, number 9, and DJ Lagway at Florida at number 10, who's going to miss some of the spring. He's limited with that arm injury, but he certainly seems like he's in for a big year as well. All right, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, Glen West of Go247 is going to hop on in his normal slot. We're going to kind of put a button on LSU basketball. We'll preview the SEC tournament matchup against Mississippi State, and we'll talk some LSU football as the first media availability is tomorrow morning. Glen will likely be out there. We'll talk about all that on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. They're the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana, and they're right here in Baton Rouge. I told y'all earlier this week, we were driving, my wife goes, oh, that's that car I really like. It's a Genesis. And she had no idea that I even do this. I was like, yeah, they're really nice. They're really, really nice. And you should know it too. You don't see a ton of Genesis on the road because it's fairly new to our city here. They've only been at that location for a year and a half, but go check it out. It's a luxury vehicle. It's a luxury experience to be a Genesis driver. That means 3 years of complimentary maintenance, a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. It's a luxury experience at a reasonable price over at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every single car that's on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. And all of them, every single model, from the entry level to the highest end, come with the same safety features. Safety is a priority for Genesis. Go check them out. Genesis of Baton Rouge. They're online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. That's Genesis of Baton Rouge.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Welcome back in. Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp sitting in the host chair for Mr. Hunt Palmer as him and his wife had a baby on Sunday, so he will be out for the majority of the week. Talked to him a little bit yesterday. He might be back Thursday, might be back Friday, but somewhere in that range is when he plans to get back. Every Tuesday around this time, Hunt is joined by Glen West, a senior writer at Go247, and Glen hops on with us right now. Glen, how are you this morning?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Glen, want to start a little bit with LSU basketball. They wrapped up their regular season on Saturday against a Texas A&M team. They wound up losing by 14. They were up by 2 at halftime and then just kind of collapsed in the second half. On top of that, they play their first-round SEC tournament game tomorrow night against Mississippi State. As far as like maybe regular season, like, can Matt McMahon turn things around in Baton Rouge?
It's a very loaded question because, we haven't been able to see it yet through 3 seasons. I mean, they had the sign of progress last year with the 9-9, 500 conference play record. They, I think, over-exceeded expectations last year to some degree with the roster they had. And then, this year there was a number of things working against them, and certainly injuries played a factor. And not having Jalen Reed most of the year. I mean, Tyrell Ward left the program before the season even started. Those were 2 huge pieces to the previous couple teams. So you're starting behind the 8 ball there. And you could just see, though, this team didn't have the size or kind of the makeup to keep up with, a lot of these SEC teams this year. And I think you bring up the last A&M game. It was a perfect blend of maybe what's gone wrong with this team. They haven't been able to shoot the ball well in the second half here recently. I believe they started the second half of that game, 1 for 15 from the field. And, it's not like A&M was blowing them out or anything with their offense, but, they were able to put it together enough offense to pull away by 10, 12 points there and hand LSU another loss. And it's just been a very common theme this year, whether it's been, this inefficient shooting, the rebounding, especially on the offensive glass. They've just been pounded on the offensive glass for most of the year, and then certainly the turnovers and some guard play that you were hoping would be a little bit crisper this year just hasn't been as consistently as you needed it to be. So to answer your question directly, I think it's very much up in the air about what they can do in this program, and this is a huge offseason for Matt McMahon. I mean, they don't get any bigger than this one. I would imagine he's on some rocky ground here going into the next year, and hopefully the amount of resources that LSU is expecting to pour into the program this year can help and reflect a roster that's a little bit more competitive this time next year.
Glen, what kind of shot do you give them in their round 1 SEC game against Mississippi State?
I give them a shot. I mean, they were competitive with Mississippi State about a week and change ago. I mean, they were hanging with them for about 25 minutes of that contest, but very much like the rest of conference play, Mississippi State was able to, lock down defensively and get at LSU's guards a little bit and force some turnovers, force LSU into some shots that maybe were more healthy for Mississippi State, and then they were able to convert on the other end and pull away a little bit there in the second half. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. I mean, they don't LSU does not match up well with Mississippi State and their size and everything like that. So certainly they're going to go into this game not favored to win it. I mean, State's going to be a tournament team this year probably, and they're going to have every ounce to kind of pour into this game to make sure that they can kind of secure a seed here in the NCAA tournament. So they're going to get their best shot, and LSU's just got to be able to match their intensity, and hopefully they can get a little bit healthy. That's the other thing here. They've been without Corey Chess and Victorious Miller for the last week or two. Getting those two guys back just to kind of help with the depth and spread out some of those minutes, I think would be extremely helpful for LSU in this game.
Glenn, shifting to something that fans are a lot more excited about. Spring practice opened up on Saturday for your LSU Tigers football team. Media's first viewing will be tomorrow morning. Look, when they allow everyone to go out there, like what's something you're looking forward to seeing the most for this football team?
Yeah, we only get 20 minutes tomorrow, so we're going to have to be pretty selective about what we want to see. But I think for me, the first thing I'm going to do is walk over and see how Kyle Williams is teaching the defensive linemen, that interior D line. I think that's going to be a major storyline this spring. It's just how much those guys are able to evolve and develop under him this offseason. And so just getting a feel for what he's like as a coach, how he's instructing those players out there, I think will be really interesting to see. And then, kind of sticking with the defensive side of the ball, I'm definitely going to be watching the secondary. I mean, they poured a ton of resources into this, cornerback and safety room to a lesser degree this offseason to try to get this thing, not only competitive, but a strength of their defense, which is what LSU prided itself on there from 2007 till about 2019 there, when they were winning all those championships and making those deep runs. So they got to get back to a point where the secondary is a strength, and they, I think, have some really nice pieces at cornerback, and I think development wise at safety is going to be really important for that group. So those are probably the two position groups I'll be looking at most closely tomorrow, and then certainly spreading it out to the other positions as we kind of move along through spring practice.
Glen West, our guest right now. Glenn, I'm really glad you brought up you want to see Kyle Williams. As far as LSU making the hire, Kyle Williams to replace Bo Davis, what were your thoughts on that hire?
Yeah, I thought it was, it was definitely not something that was expected. I don't think going into last week, he was not somebody that was on a lot of people's radar, but I think it came together pretty quickly. And so there was initial kind of a genuine surprise there, maybe a little bit of a surprise. And then you quickly kind of do some research and some diving into who he was as a player for all those years at LSU and then in the NFL. And he's just got a story, man, that matches up to a guy who I think is going to be able to relate to these players. Obviously coaching is so much different than playing the position, and making sure you're getting your message across to younger players is going to be a real challenge. But he's been at the high school level now for 4 or 5 years, trying to, I think, learn that aspect of it a little bit, and I'm sure he's made some recruiting connections during that time. So I'll be very interested to see what he is able to do with this group. I think coming into this season, interior defensive line was going to have to be one of those groups that really developed well and was able to take some genuine steps forward. And it's certainly, being on your 6th or 7th D-line coach now in 6 years, that there's just not a whole lot of connection there, I think, between year over year. So making sure that Kyle Williams is a guy that can do the job, do it well, and then maybe stick around for a little while, I think were all things that Brian Kelly and certainly the decision makers wanted to hear from him. And obviously he did a really good job in the interview process for them to have that kind of trust in him.
Glenn, as far as the offensive line goes, I want to switch sides of the ball. It was reported that Josh Thompson will not be with LSU for the start of spring practice. He's scheduled to join later. Maybe what younger offensive lineman do you think you want to see step up with Josh Thompson absent?
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, I think I'll probably start with Weston Davis. I mean, I think Thompson's probably going to be a guy that plays guard for you, and Weston Davis is probably going to be a right tackle. So, I think he's just one of those young guys that they really, really liked in recruiting, and now with so many spots open here, I think he's going to get the first crack at maybe being the right tackle. And as you shift kind of to the interior there, I mean, they just signed two really highly touted guys on the interior, and Solomon Thomas and Carius Kern. I think those are going to be two guys to really watch closely for those spots. Certainly, you can't count out DJ Chester, can't count out Paul Mubanga, two guys that have a lot of playing experience now under their belt from last year, and hopefully have learned a lot from their experiences. And so I would say those are the two that probably get the initial crack at being the interior guys, with Thompson still out for a little while, but Thompson will be back here, or he will be in the building towards the end of spring camp, and I think he'll get a good 7 or 8 practices in with the team. So he's a veteran guy, and I'm sure will be able to adjust pretty quickly there. So, but those are a few guys that come to mind off the top of my head. Cohen Eccles is maybe another that you could see play guard and maybe a little bit of center as well. So they have some options on the interior. I actually like their interior depth maybe a little bit more than their tackle depth right now, just because of some of the known commodities that are on the interior that you've seen a little bit. So just getting those guys in there and well adjusted are going to be really important for Brad Davis to kind of hash out this spring.
Reports were that Braylon Moore, the Virginia Tech transfer, was going to get the first crack at center. I mean, and DJ Chester was going to get pushed down to guard. What are your thoughts on Chester as a guard?
I think it's a natural fit for him. I mean, look, anytime you're asking a second-year player who's never really played the position or hadn't played the position at that level to kind of go in there and start 13 games, there was going to be some growing pains. And Chester certainly had some struggles last year at center. And so, at guard, you don't have quite as many responsibilities in terms of getting the guys lined up and calling out protections, that sort of thing, snapping the ball. I mean, as simple as it sounds, just me saying it, I mean, that's something that takes some time if you're an offensive lineman. So, I think it's going to be something where Chester maybe can thrive at guard. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got the physical traits to really be a really solid offensive lineman. And, hopefully he's used last year's experience to good and put it to good use, and will be somebody that absolutely can play on that interior, because I do think maybe the best possible interior lineup that LSU could have would be DJ Chester at one of those guard spots, Josh Thompson at the other, and then Braylon Moore kind of there in the middle, anchoring at center. Those are your most experienced players, and I think would make a lot of sense for LSU if those three are able to kind of obtain those 3 spots.
Glenn, before I get you out of here, look, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, it's offensive line that I'm watching, it's safety that I'm watching. In your opinion, going into spring, biggest question mark for this LSU football team is what?
I think integrating some of these new pieces, whether it's from the transfer portal or the freshman class, on the defensive side of the ball specifically. I mean, offense, I think you trust Garrett Nussmeier, you trust those guys to put in the work offensively from a passing down perspective. And I think there's just going to be so much more turnover defensively than there will be offensively for this team. And, whether it's the edge rushers and Patrick Payton and Jack Pyburn and Jamari Butler, or, you look at the safety group with Marcus Cooley or Mansour Delane, does he play some safety this spring? And do they kind of do a little bit of, kind of mixing and matching there with him at cornerback? And, Jakeem Jackson's somebody that, if you've been on social media, had a big pick on day one of spring practice. So, just integrating all these new defensive pieces are going to be really important for LSU, just to kind of get a feel for what these guys' best positions are and how they can maybe influence the thinking going into the summer and how they want to, structure this thing in the fall. So I would say that's going to be the number one thing for me that's going to be really important for LSU to start finding some answers to, I guess, over the next several weeks.
Glen West, senior writer at Go247. Glenn, thanks so much for hopping on with us today.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That was Glen West right there, giving us a little preview of LSU spring football as media availability. The first one will be tomorrow. Guys, I got my media credential to go to the Brian Kelly press conference, and not going to be able to do any of them because they are all at like 9:30 in the morning, and media viewing is at 8 a.m., and I will be here for Off the Bench. So I'm sure some of these shows will have updates for you as far as boots on the ground out there at LSU spring practice. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, Bo Davis met with the media yesterday, talked about his reasoning for taking the job with the New Orleans Saints, and he actually gave his thoughts on new LSU defensive line coach Kyle Williams and what he could do in Baton Rouge. It's coming up on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show. 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, highlandig.com is the website. Property and casualty or group employee benefits. Your one-stop shop for all things insurance is, of course, the Highland Insurance Group. If you're a business owner and you don't have a great relationship with your insurance broker, they're just the guy who came with the lowest premium number. That's one way to handle it, but it might not be the best way, especially when something happens. Whether it's a hurricane or a car accident or a cyber breach or a lawsuit or an injury. When that happens, you're going to need your insurance to respond. And if you only have the insurance in place because it was the cheapest one, it may not. Jonathan Carver and his team can be a trusted advisor and a part of your team as a business to make sure that your business continues to run even if the event happens. Give them a call. Or check them out online, highlandig.com. They're right here in Baton Rouge, but they can help you out statewide. It's Jonathan Carver and his team at the Highland Insurance Group. They're online at highlandig.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Welcome back in. Final segment, hour number one, a Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp here with you, filling in for Hunt Palmer, who is scheduled to be back Thursday. It may be Friday. We're going to be in contact with Hunt all week long. I'll give you some updates when I receive them myself. Look, I teased it going into break there a little bit. Bo Davis, who just recently signed with the New Orleans Saints to be their defensive line coach, leaving LSU where he held the same position, spoke yesterday with the media about his decision to leave the LSU Tigers. He said, look, it was an opportunity that presented itself, and I think it was a good opportunity for me and my family. I will always love LSU. Look, obviously, Davis is an alum of LSU. He played here years ago. He had been on the staff in a smaller capacity a while back, and then, of course, the D-line coach last year. A lot of people have speculated, hey, does Bo Davis, is he not in with the NIL game and the transfer portal game? That's all speculation. Bo Davis has never publicly came out and said that. But look, he's staying in the state of Louisiana nonetheless. He was actually asked, though, about Kyle Williams, who was replacing him as LSU's defensive line coach. He said, I think they're getting a good person and a very good coach. I think it's going to be tremendous for him, and the knowledge that he brings from the game to these young men, I think he's going to do an unbelievable job. We mentioned last week when when Kyle Williams was hired in place of Bo Davis that he actually worked with Ahmad Bro at Ruston High School, where Kyle Williams has worked since 2020. Look, can you develop Dominic McKinley? Ahmad Bro looked really good as a freshman. What's he going to look like with another year in this program? Now, you have Jacoby and Guillory, who, poor guy, first off, can't stay healthy. Secondly, this is his fourth D-line coach in the last 4 years. Like, Brian Kelly has had a different defensive line coach every year he has been in Baton Rouge, but I'm not so much as worried about Jacoby and Guillory. He's been here in this program. He's at least been under Brian Kelly for 4 years now, so I'm not that worried about Jacoby and Guillory at this point. I want to make sure you can develop and hold on to a Dominic McKinley and Ahmad Bro. They were big pieces for you a year ago, especially in Ahmad Bro. I mean, he had to gain 40 pounds before he got comfortable playing that defensive tackle spot. If you remember when Ahmad Bro signed, he was only about 245, 250 pounds. They got him all the way up to around 285, 290. I mean, he had to put on 40 pounds just to play inside. He played on the edge most of the time in high school. I mean, that's all he did most of his life. And for him to make the impact he did as a freshman, playing a new position, playing with all that added weight, it certainly gave you hope and optimism if you're an LSU fan. And as far as Dominic McKinley, there's just not guys walking in your building that are 6'6", 315 every single day. Now, you do have a lot more meat on the bones than you had last year. You basically had Jacoby and Guillory, and then once he went down, you had a really, really young Dominic McKinley, JVR Suggs, who hovered around 300 pounds, Gio Paez, about the same size. That was it. Now you have Dominic McKinley, who's a year older, I mentioned, 6'6", 315 pounds, You sign Zion Williams. He is 6'4", 330 pounds. Sydir Mitchell comes in from Texas. He's the transfer. He's over 330 pounds. He's 6'5". Brandon Brown comes in. He's at 291. Can he put on a little bit of weight? Walter Mathis is about 285, 290 right now. Can you play him inside? Can you play him outside? He's got a little bit of versatility. The depth is there on this defensive line. It's just up to Kyle Williams to develop that depth. Now, we talked about it. Kyle Williams has never been a college coach in any capacity. But if there's somebody out there that can teach the defensive line position from a technical standpoint, I got to believe that it's Kyle Williams, a guy that played 13 years in the NFL. It was a team captain for the Buffalo Bills, who had one of the best defenses in the NFL. He is a multiple-time Pro Bowler in the NFL. So while Kyle Williams doesn't have the skins on the wall in terms of on-field coaching, in terms of being a recruiter, if you need somebody to teach technique, to tap into all the raw potential of a Dominic McKinley, of an Ahmad Bro, of these multiple transfers and early enrollees as freshmen that I just mentioned, I don't see why Kyle Williams can't be that guy for you. All right, look, coming up in hour number 2, there has been a lot of free agency news
The Hunt Palmer
coming out
Show.
the NFL. And we're going to get to that when we get back. We're also going to have Sharif Ishak from WDSU, and we're going to close things out with Take It or Leave It. That's coming up in hour number 2 of the Hunt Palmer Show. Stay tuned. We got Sports Center at the top of the hour as well. That's all coming up here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Audio Video Security Solutions, AVSSLA.com is the website. Mitchell Fisher and his local team are fantastic to work with, and they do a number of things. I talk to you about security systems all the time. They handled ours. If you're looking to get a security system at your business or at your home that's complete with all the cameras, the apps, everything that's got you set up at the top of a button, they can do that for you. They can also help you out with your outdoor entertainment space. If this is the time of year where you love to get out back when it's a little bit cooler, light the fire, listen to some tunes, or watch TV in the outdoor area, Mitchell Fisher and his team at Audio Video Security Solutions can help you out with all of that. They can supply the television. They can supply all of the equipment. Their install at the Palmer House was just painless and easy, and the customer service afterward has been great. They can do simple things like I talked about mounting the television. They can also do complex things as well. So give them a call or just check them out online, avssla.com. It's Audio Video Security Solutions.